Emily was completely caught off guard, not by the hushed conversations, not by the eerie quiet, but by the moment her husband stood at the altar and rejected her in front of everyone in the church. But hold on, this wasn't just about embarrassment. This was a trap, because everything they thought they knew about her was a fabrication. And when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't just leave the congregation in disbelief. It shattered everything. Every Sunday, the church was bustling with people. Not just busy, it was absolutely packed. Folks traveled from all corners of the city just to hear Pastor Richard Cole deliver his message. He had a way about him, powerful, confident, and commanding. When he stood at the altar, his voice resonated through the room like a clap of thunder. People listened intently. They believed. They trusted him. But behind that strong voice and polished image was a home that told a different story. Emily Cole always sat quietly in the front row, her hands resting gently on her lap, her head slightly tilted as she absorbed every word. She couldn't see the crowd or the dazzling lights, but she felt everything. The silence, the tension, the distance. Emily had been blind for years. It wasn't something she was born with. It was a result of an accident that no one in the church ever mentioned. Richard used to talk about it. Back then, he would hold her hand, guide her steps, and speak softly to her. He would say, "Emily, even if you can't see the world, I'll always be your eyes." But that was a long time ago. Now things had changed, very much so. These days, Richard hardly spoke to her at home. Their conversations were brief and cold, almost as if he were addressing a stranger. Sometimes, he wouldn't say anything at all, and Emily felt that silence, not with her eyes, but deep within her heart. She always did. Yet, she never voiced her complaints. She continued to stand by him, sitting in the front row, smiling when people greeted her. She would say, "My husband is doing God's work." To her, love was all about staying put, even when it hurt. But there was something she was unaware of, something brewing just out of sight. At first, it was merely soft whispers, church members chatting quietly after the service, conversations that hushed as Emily approached, their voices barely audible, filled with unspoken judgments. Then it escalated. A few women began to keep their distance. Some even stopped acknowledging her altogether. Even the ushers, who once guided her with kindness, now did so briskly, devoid of warmth. And Richard, he changed even more. He grew distant, irritated. One evening, Emily found herself in the living room, waiting. The clock ticked away, each second dragging on. Richard was late again. When he finally walked in, he didn't greet her, didn't ask how she was, didn't even take a seat. He just stood there, silent. Then he said something that sent a chill down her spine. "Emily, we need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Cold, dry, unfamiliar. She turned a bit toward him. Her curiosity piqued. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A long silence stretched between them. Too long. Then he let out a sigh. Not the kind that comes from exhaustion, but one filled with frustration. "We can't keep going like this." Emily's fingers clenched around the fabric of her dress. "What do you mean?" she asked, though deep down, she already sensed it. Something was off, something significant, but she couldn't quite grasp what it was. And that was the real issue. As she sat there, trying to piece it all together, trying to hold on, trying to mend something she couldn't even see. Richard had already made his choice. And it wasn't just him. The church was already watching, already judging, already making decisions. And Emily, she was completely oblivious. Oblivious to the fact that everything around her was slowly turning against her. Oblivious to the whispers that weren't just idle chatter. Oblivious to the fact that people were starting to believe something about her. Something she never did. Something she couldn't defend. Because she didn't even know it was there. And the hardest part, the man who was meant to shield her, was the one drifting away. Bit by bit, day by day, until that one moment arrived. That would change everything. Completely. But Emily wasn't prepared. Not for what lay ahead. Not for the shame. Not for the betrayal. Not for the truth. Because soon enough, The same church that once embraced her with open arms would watch her leave in silence, rejected, broken, alone. And when that moment finally arrived, it wouldn't just alter her life, it would change his too, but not in the way he thought, because everything was about to shift. The change didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. But Emily sensed it. She always did. The first time it happened was after a Sunday service. A woman she had known for years walked right past her. No greeting, no stopping, not even a glance when Emily softly said, "Good afternoon." It felt odd, but Emily brushed it off. "Maybe she didn't hear me," she murmured to herself. Little did she know that was just the start. The next time it happened again, and again, and again. People who once smiled at her now seemed to avoid her. Conversations would halt as she approached. Footsteps would change direction. Voices would drop to whispers. And the silence, it grew louder than any words could express. But she didn't get it. How could she? No one was telling her anything. And that was the hardest part. While she tried to keep her cool, trying to convince herself that everything was fine, something sinister was already taking root. A story, a dangerous one, and it was spreading quickly. But Emily was oblivious. She couldn't see the glances, couldn't read the expressions. All she had was a feeling, and something felt off. Very off. Then one evening, her phone rang. She picked it up cautiously. "Hello," she answered. There was a pause on the other end before a voice came through. Soft, anxious. "Emily, it's Sister Clara." Emily felt a flicker of relief. Clara was one of the few who still treated her like everything was normal. "Yes, Clara, how are you?" she asked. Silence hung in the air, not the comfortable kind, but the heavy kind. "Emily," Clara began, then hesitated. It was as if she was at a loss for words. Emily's smile slowly disappeared. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. Another moment of silence hung in the air. Then Clara said something that left Emily puzzled. "Be careful, please." Emily's brow furrowed. Careful of what? But just like that, the call ended. No explanation. No clarity. Just a wave of fear and confusion washed over her. Emily sat there, clutching the phone, her heart racing. What did that even mean? Be careful? Of whom? Of what? But answers were nowhere to be found. Not yet. And that was the real issue. Because in the days that followed, things took a turn for the worse. Much worse. Richard grew distant. His words became shorter, sharper. One morning, Emily accidentally dropped a glass in the kitchen, and it shattered on the floor, the sound ringing out. She froze. "I'm sorry," she murmured. But Richard didn't take it lightly. "Emily," he snapped, his tone harsh and uncharacteristic. "You need to be more careful." She flinched. "I didn't mean to," but he interrupted her. "That's always the issue, isn't it?" Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Emily didn't respond. She was confused by his words, and that frightened her. His anger felt disproportionate to the situation. Something deeper was troubling him, but he never explained. Instead, he started coming home later, spending more time at church in meetings and private discussions, long conversations behind closed doors. Every time Emily inquired, he would simply say, "It's church matters. Nothing more, nothing less." But here's the twist she was unaware of. Those meetings weren't about church growth, prayer, or helping others. They were about her, Emily. Her name was being tossed around, judged, and questioned. And slowly, she was becoming someone she didn't recognize. A few church leaders had begun to talk, then accuse, and then sway others. And the narrative? It was dangerous. They claimed Emily wasn't who she seemed. They suggested her blindness was concealing something dark, something that could shatter the church's reputation. But none of it was ever proven. None of it was real. Still, people believed it. Because once doubt creeps in, it spreads like wildfire. And Richard, he heard it all. At first, he stood by her side. "Emily would never do that," he insisted. "She's my wife." But the pressure didn't let up. If anything, it only grew stronger. "Think about the church," they urged him. "Think about your position. Think about your reputation." And slowly, oh so slowly, His confidence began to waver. The voices wouldn't quiet down. The whispers kept coming. The accusations just kept piling up, until one nagging thought slipped into his mind. What if they were right? That was the moment everything shifted. Because once doubt takes the place of trust, love starts to wither away. And Emily, she had no idea she was losing everything. Bit by bit, day by day, right in front of those who once cherished her. But now they didn't. And soon a moment was on the horizon, a moment that would turn whispers into action. And when it finally happened, there would be no turning back. That was the moment everything began to unravel. By the time Emily figured out that something was really off, it was already too late. The church just didn't feel the same anymore. Not the vibe, not the people, not even the air around her. Everything felt different, cold, distant, unfamiliar. And the hardest part? No one said anything outright. They just watched, judged, whispered, and turned away. One Sunday morning, Emily found herself in her usual spot, front row, hands neatly folded, head slightly bowed, listening, waiting, hoping, but something was off. There were more faces than usual. The atmosphere was tense, quiet in a way that felt strange, like something was on the verge of happening, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Then she heard footsteps, slow, firm, approaching the altar. Richard. She recognized those steps immediately, but there was something about them that felt different. He wasn't calm. He wasn't steady. He felt heavy, burdened. Then he halted, right in front of the congregation, and silence fell. Deep silence, the kind that makes your heart pound louder. Emily tilted her head slightly, listening, waiting. Then he spoke. "Today," he started. His voice lacked its usual confidence. It was strained. "We need to talk about something important." Emily's fingers tightened a bit. Important? What did that even mean? The room shifted. People leaned in closer. Some already knew. Some were just waiting. And some were relishing it. Then Richard said something that left her confused. At times, the people closest to us are not who we think they are. Emily frowned slightly. What was he getting at? Her heart raced, but she stayed still. Because she trusted him. She believed in him. Even now. But then, something unexpected happened. A voice from the crowd. Sharp. By the time Emily figured out that something was really off, it was already too late. The church just didn't feel the same anymore. Not the vibe. Not the people. Not even the air around her. Everything felt different, cold, distant, unfamiliar. And the hardest part? No one said anything outright. They just watched, judged, whispered, and turned away. One Sunday morning, Emily found herself in her usual spot, front row, hands neatly folded, head slightly bowed, listening, waiting, hoping, but something was off. There were more faces than usual. The atmosphere was tense, quiet in a way that felt strange, like something was on the verge of happening, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Then she heard footsteps. Slow, firm, approaching the altar. Richard. She recognized those steps immediately, but there was something about them that felt different. He wasn't calm. He wasn't steady. He felt heavy, burdened. Then he halted, right in front of the congregation, and silence fell. Deep silence, the kind that makes your heart pound louder. Emily tilted her head slightly, listening, waiting. Then he spoke. "Today," he started. His voice lacked its usual confidence. It was strained. "We need to talk about something important." Emily's fingers tightened a bit. Important? What did that even mean? The room shifted. People leaned in closer. Some already knew. Some were just waiting. And some were relishing it. Then Richard said something that left her confused. At times, the people closest to us are not who we think they are. Emily frowned slightly. What was he getting at? Her heart raced, but she stayed still. Because she trusted him. She believed in him. Even now. But then, something unexpected happened. A voice from the crowd. Sharp. The room fell into a heavy silence. Not the kind that comes from respect, but a weighty silence filled with judgment. It felt like a pressure on Emily's chest, making it hard to breathe. She could sense it, every second of it, with every eye fixed on her. Even without seeing them, she just knew something awful was unfolding, and she was right in the middle of it. Then Richard stepped forward, his voice steady and controlled. "For the sake of this church," he said slowly, "we must act." Emily's fingers trembled in her lap. Act? What did that even mean? Her heart started to race, faster and harder. "Richard," she called out again, her voice softer now, almost breaking. But he didn't respond. He didn't even glance her way. And that hurt more than anything else. This wasn't just any man speaking. This was her husband, the one who had vowed to protect her. Now, he stood before a crowd, allowing them to turn against her. "There are things," he continued, "that can no longer be ignored." The murmurs grew again, louder and bolder. People weren't just whispering anymore. They were agreeing, feeding off one another. "Yes," someone chimed in. "We've noticed it too. It's been happening for a while." Emily's breath quickened. "Notice what?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What are you all talking about?" But no one answered her. That was the cruel part. They discussed her, around her, but never to her. And then it escalated. "She's not who she says she is," a man shouted from the back. Emily flinched, her body tensing. "That's not true," she murmured, almost to herself. But the voices kept coming. "There are rumors, serious ones. This church cannot be stained." Just like that, the atmosphere shifted from doubt to conviction, from hushed whispers to bold accusations. And Richard? He didn't just let it unfold. He embraced it, became part of the chaos. "Emily," he finally said, her name hanging in the air, cold and distant, as if it meant nothing to him. She turned toward him, relief washing over her that he had finally acknowledged her. But what he said next shattered her world. "You need to leave." The words fell like a heavy stone, final and irreversible. The entire church fell silent. Even those who had supported it were taken aback by the severity of his command. Emily's lips parted slowly. "Leave?" she echoed softly, as if the word itself was foreign to her, her mind struggling to grasp the reality of it. "Yes," Richard replied, devoid of hesitation or emotion. "You cannot remain here anymore." A deep silence enveloped the room. Then Clara's voice pierced through the stillness. "No, this is wrong." She shot up from her seat, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You can't do this to her." But the pressure was overwhelming. Too many voices, too much influence, too much fear. "Sit down, Clara," someone snapped. "Don't get involved. This is a leadership decision. The church must be protected." Just like that, even the one voice trying to stand up for Emily was silenced. Emily's hands clenched into fists, her body trembling, not just from fear, but from the pain of betrayal. "Richard," she said again, her voice cracking this time. "What did I do?" That question lingered in the air, heavy and painful, because deep down, she truly didn't know, and that uncertainty made it all the more unbearable. But Richard stayed silent. He couldn't bring himself to speak. Deep down, he knew he didn't have any proof, just a weight of pressure, a chorus of voices, and a cloud of fear. Instead of facing that reality, he opted for power, for reputation, for image, choosing them over truth, over love, and over her. "This decision has been made," he declared with conviction. "You need to go." And that was that. No explanations, no evidence, no defense, just a final, unyielding judgment. Emily rose slowly, her legs trembling and unsteady. The room felt larger now, colder, and strangely unfamiliar. She reached out, searching for some guidance, but no one stepped forward to assist her. Not the ushers, not the members, not even those who once called her family. And in that moment, everything shifted. The same church that had once guided her now stood by, watching her struggle alone. Then, unexpectedly, a hand found hers. It was gentle, firm, and safe. "Clara, I'm here," she whispered softly. Emily's lips quivered, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming weight of everything crumbling around her. Together, they began to walk, slowly, step by step, toward the exit. Each step felt heavy, each one final. The doors swung open and light flooded in. Just like that, Emily found herself outside, cast out, rejected, forgotten. Behind her, the church door shut. But what those inside didn't realize was that they had just made a grave mistake. The story they believed wasn't the truth, not even close. And soon enough, that truth would start to surface. When it did, it wouldn't just rattle the church. It would lay everything bare. What followed was something no one was ready for. The hush that enveloped the church didn't linger for long. At first, there was this odd sense of triumph, as if something had been taken care of, like balance had been restored. People began to murmur to one another, some nodding in agreement, while others sat in silence, clearly uncertain. But Richard, he remained motionless on the altar, gazing out at the congregation, and for the first time, something felt off. Not just in the room, but deep within him. Something was amiss. Yet he brushed it aside. He had to, because in his mind, he had done what was necessary, what was expected, what was demanded of him. But that nagging feeling didn't fade. It intensified. Slowly, quietly. Then the door swung open again, the sound reverberating through the space. Heads turned, conversations halted, and then footsteps. Not just one or two, but several, calm, assured, unhurried. And then a voice broke the tension. Pastor Richard Cole. The entire room went still, because this voice, it didn't belong to a congregant. It wasn't from the leadership. It didn't belong to the church at all. It belonged to authority. Real authority. 3 men entered, sharply dressed, serious, and focused. One of them stepped forward. "We need to talk to you." Richard's heart skipped a beat. "What's this about?" he asked, striving to maintain his composure. But the man didn't waver. "It's about your wife." Silence fell. Immediate, heavy, confusing. Richard's expression shifted slightly. "My wife?" "Yes," the man replied. "Emily Cole." The entire church leaned in, because now something felt very wrong. "We've been looking into a report," the man continued. "A report concerning false allegations, manipulation, and the attempted removal of an individual based on false claims." Whispers began to circulate again, but this time not with confidence, with doubt, with fear. Richard's throat tightened. "I don't understand," he said. But deep down, he could feel the pieces starting to fall into place. Then the man said something that changed everything. "The claims made against your wife," he paused. The word, fabricated, crashed into the room like a thunderclap. Fabricated. Fake. Not real. The silence that followed was deafening, more intense than anything that had come before. Richard blinked slowly, disbelief washing over him. "That's not possible," he murmured, almost as if he were afraid to say out loud. But the man pressed on. "We have evidence, messages, recordings, testimonies." Each word landed like a weight, heavier than the last. This was orchestrated. In that moment, everything crumbled, because now it wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about the truth, and the truth was anything but pretty. "One of your senior members," the man stated, "created the story." Gasps rippled through the room. Heads turned, eyes darted around. The enemy wasn't out there. It was lurking within. "The goal," he continued, "was to remove her from your life and gain influence over this church." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The whispers, the pressure, the meetings, the voices. It wasn't truth. It was manipulation. And Richard had fallen for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Then came the final blow. "And you," the man said, locking eyes with him, "acted on it without proof." Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Richard's chest tightened, his mind racing. And then it struck him. That moment, that haunting question. "What did I do?" Emily's voice echoed in his mind, repeating endlessly. And now, he finally had the answer. He had destroyed her, without reason, without truth, without a second thought. His knees felt weak, and his hands trembled ever so slightly. The room was looking at him differently now. Not with respect, not with trust, but with doubt, disappointment, and shock. Then Clara stood up again. But this time, no one dared to stop her. "I told you," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I told you this wasn't right." And this time people listened, because now the truth was out, fully, clearly, completely, and there stood Richard, not as a commanding pastor, but as a man who had made a grave mistake. Outside, just beyond those doors, was the woman he had cast aside, alone, hurt, and broken. In that moment, he realized the shocking truth. The unexpected ending had already begun, and the hardest part, it was too late. That moment, that choice, that action, it had been her last chance. And in that instant, everything changed forever. The church had lost its power. It felt heavy, quiet, and exposed. No one dared to speak or move. The same faces that once radiated confidence now avoided each other's gaze. The truth had turned everything upside down. And at the heart of it all stood Pastor Richard Cole, frozen in place, broken in a way no one had ever witnessed. The authority that once filled his voice had vanished, and the confidence in his stance was gone too. All that lingered was a deep, painful realization. He swallowed hard, his throat parched and his chest tight. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, almost fearful of the answer. Clara met his gaze, not with anger but with disappointment. "You should have asked yourself that before you sent her away," she replied softly. Those words struck harder than anything else could, because they were undeniably true. He had no idea where his own wife was. The woman who had trusted him, loved him, and stood by him even as he changed. And yet, he had cast her aside in front of everyone, without proof, without listening, without a second thought. But this was the moment everything began to shift, not just for him, but for the entire church. The very voices that had once supported him started to turn. "This isn't right," someone murmured. "How could we let this happen?" "We believed lies." The atmosphere shifted rapidly, from support to regret, from confidence to shame. Richard felt every ounce of it. But in that moment, it didn't seem to matter. Not anymore. Because there was only one thing that mattered now. Emily. He turned on his heel, striding away from the altar with urgency. No time to waste. People stepped aside, parting like the sea, and no one dared to stop him. They understood now. This wasn't about leadership or the church. It was about a man desperate to mend what he had shattered. Yet deep down, a voice whispered the harsh truth. Some things just can't be fixed. He flung open the church doors, the same ones she had walked through, the same ones that had closed behind her. They swung wide again, but the world outside felt different. Bigger, emptier, colder. "Emily!" he shouted, his voice bouncing off the walls. But there was no answer, just silence, the kind that sinks into your chest. He pressed on, moving faster, scanning the surroundings, searching, hoping. Emily. Still nothing. That's when the reality hit him. The weight of his choices. Not when the truth came to light. Not when the congregation turned against him. But right then in the silence, in the void where she used to be. He didn't know where to find her. His pace slowed, breaths coming in heavy, uneven gasps. "What have I done?" he murmured. And for the first time, Pastor Richard Cole broke down. Not in front of the congregation. Not at the altar, but alone, outside, where no one could witness his pain. But it was all too real. Days slipped by, and the church transformed. Attendance dwindled. Conversations shifted and respect faded. Because once trust is shattered, it's not easily restored. Richard wasn't the same anymore. His sermons grew shorter, softer, lacking the confidence they once had. Every word he uttered now served as a reminder of his failures. To protect, to listen, to believe. And Emily, she didn't come back. Not the next day. Not the week after. Not even when people began to inquire about her. Because sometimes when someone walks away in pain, they don't return the same. But hold on, the story didn't end there. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. Clara walked into the church, calm and quiet, exuding certainty. And she wasn't alone. A gentle hand rested on her arm, familiar and reassuring. The room fell silent, because she was there. Emily, standing tall, different, not shattered, but transformed. The whole church turned to look. Shock rippled through the crowd. Whispers began again, but this time they weren't filled with judgment. They were laced with disbelief, with regret. Richard shot up from his seat, his heart pounding. "Emily," he breathed, struggling to find his voice. She turned her head slightly toward him, calm, collected, no anger, no tears, just clarity. "I came back," she said softly. "Not for you, not for them," she paused, "but for myself." The silence enveloped the room once more, but this time it felt different. It was humbling, because the woman they once thought was fragile now stood stronger than all of them. Richard took a cautious step forward. "Emily, I'm sorry," his voice cracked. "I was wrong. I should have trusted you. I should have listened. I should have—" She raised her hand gently, halting him, not harshly, just enough. "You should have believed me," she replied. Simple, direct, final. And that was it. No shouting, no theatrics, just raw truth. And somehow that stung more, because it was real, because it was deserved. Richard nodded slowly, tears welling his eyes, not for show, not for sympathy, but because he finally grasped the weight of it all. Too late. "Can you forgive me?" he asked softly. The entire room held its breath, waiting, watching. But Emily didn't respond right away. She paused, took a deep breath, then said something no one saw coming. "I forgive you." A wave of relief washed over the room. But she continued, "But I won't stay." And just like that, the relief vanished. Because forgiveness didn't mean things would go back to how they were. It didn't mean he could erase the past. She stepped back a little. Some things once broken can't be the same again. Her words were calm, but they carried weight, finality. And then she turned away, not in anger, not in pain, but in strength, and began to walk away. This time, not lost, not rejected, not broken, but free. This wasn't just a loss. It was a consequence. And as the doors closed behind her once more, the lesson finally sank in. Deep, permanent, unforgettable. Because sometimes power can blind us more than darkness ever could. Sometimes the pressure can twist the truth. And often, the very people we're meant to protect are the ones we end up hurting the most. But here's the real kicker. One decision, one fleeting moment can turn everything upside down. And when that moment arrives, you have to choose, stand for the truth or live with the regret forever. So I ask you, what would you have done?